I jolted awake to the sound of chaos. Not some poetic metaphor, but the literal, earth-shaking kind that makes your gut drop before your mind can process it. The glass walls of my greenhouse exploded outward, shattering like brittle bones breaking all at once. A deafening roar filled the air as a massive yellow bulldozer tore through my sanctuary, my pride and joy, as if it were nothing more than a heap of garbage. I stumbled outside, my heart hammering in my chest, only to find Linda standing there, arms crossed, her face smug with satisfaction. "Consider this a lesson," she said, her voice oozing with crocodile tears. "Next time, follow the rules." For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, watching years of my labor. Exotic plants I'd raised from tiny seedlings, rare blooms you couldn't find anywhere else in the state, crumple into dust beneath the bulldozer's relentless tracks. The air reeked of wet dirt and treachery. My fists clenched so hard my nails bit into my palms. Linda thought she'd won. She thought this was the end. She couldn't have been more wrong. Let's rewind a few months. Life in this neighborhood used to be calm, almost idyllic, until Linda took over as president of the HOA. That's when the absurdity began. The first fine she slapped me with was $200 for unauthorized garden decor. Apparently, my little hand-painted sign that said, "Welcome, pollinators," was a personal attack on the neighborhood's aesthetic harmony. Then came the warning about my lawn being too green. Yes, too green. Linda claimed my dedication to watering my grass made everyone else's yards look lackluster by comparison, which she called disrupting the balance. But nothing compared to her obsession with my greenhouse. The second she laid eyes on it, her face twisted like she'd bitten into a lemon. She labeled it an ugly, unapproved structure. I explained, calmly, patiently, that it complied with all zoning laws. She didn't care. Linda wasn't about rules. She was about control. She started issuing weekly violation notices, even tried rallying the neighbors to complain about it. Most of them just steered clear of her like she was contagious. One day, she showed up at my door, clipboard in hand, that infuriating smirk plastered on her face. "I'm giving you one last warning," she said. "The greenhouse has to go. It's an eyesore. It's legal." I shot back, crossing my arms. She scoffed. "Not by HOA standards." "Funny," I said, because I checked. "You can't override local zoning laws." Her eye twitched. She wasn't used to pushback. Linda thrived on intimidating people into submission. She leaned in, her voice dropping to that patronizing tone that made my blood boil. "Look, I get it. You're attached to your little plant shack. But this neighborhood has an image to uphold. Be reasonable." I was reasonable. I showed her the permits, the approval documents, every clause that proved my greenhouse was untouchable. She wouldn't even glance at them. "You're making this harder on yourself," she warned. I should have seen it then. Linda didn't take no for an answer. Then the fake fines started piling up. $500, $1,000, a letter claiming my greenhouse was spreading mold and attracting pests. Total nonsense. But the real blow came when she tried to foreclose on my house. She filed a complaint alleging unpaid HOA fees, a blatant lie, and pushed to put a lien on my property. That's when I realized this wasn't just a petty squabble. This was war. I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Margaret Voss, a woman who'd built her reputation dismantling HOAs in court. She was ecstatic about the case. "These people think they're untouchable royalty," she said, flipping through Linda's ridiculous complaints. "Let's remind her what real law looks like." We filed counterclaims, submitted evidence, and then silence. Linda backed off. No more fines, no more letters. It was like she'd lost interest. I should have known better. Which brings us back to that morning. The shattering glass, my greenhouse reduced to rubble, Linda's standing there like she'd just swatted a fly. "Don't look so shocked," she said. "I warned you." I stepped forward, my voice eerily steady. "Did you just destroy my property?" She smirked. "It was a non-compliant structure. The HOA has the right to enforce." "No, they don't." Her smile wavered. I pulled out my phone, already dialing. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Please," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "What are you going to do, call a lawyer?" "I have legal grounds." "You don't." I exhaled slowly, savoring the moment. "You just demolished a federally protected greenhouse." Linda blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Excuse me." "The plants. I said, watching her face pale. You destroyed a greenhouse housing endangered species. She shook her head. That's not. There's no way. Oh, there is. I gave her a smile. The kind that says you've just torched your own life. And you know what happens when someone destroys federally protected plant life? Well, Linda, I hope you've got a good lawyer. She stumbled back, suddenly looking less like an HOA tyrant and more like a trapped animal. The construction crew, oblivious, kept flattening what was left of my greenhouse. I didn't stop them. Linda had already dug her own grave. Her voice trembled. This is ridiculous. You're bluffing. I turned my phone toward her, letting her see the call connecting. Hi. Yes, I said to the person on the line. I need to report a major environmental violation and property destruction. Linda's face went white. I watched the gears turn as she realized how screwed she was. She'd thought she was invincible, that she could do whatever she wanted and walk away unscathed. She was dead wrong. Margaret Voss leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against a thick stack of papers. She looked up at me, her eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and predatory glee. Well, she said, flipping a page, she's a complete fool. I exhaled, the ember of rage still smoldering in my chest. Tell me something I don't know. Margaret slid the documents toward me. She thinks this is just an HOA fine. What she doesn't get is that she demolished a federally protected greenhouse. That's state and federal charges, huge fines, possible jail time, and my favorite, personal liability. She grinned. Because she ordered the demolition herself. I gripped the edge of her desk. So we can take her down? Margaret shot me a look. Oh, we're taking her down. Linda, in her arrogance, had overstepped every boundary. She'd trampled laws she had no power over. My greenhouse was registered under environmental protection statutes because of the endangered species I'd been growing for research. Destroying it wasn't just vandalism, it was a legal catastrophe. And the best part? She hadn't even checked before sending in the bulldozer. She'd acted out of spite, thinking she was untouchable. That delusion was about to crumble. We filed the lawsuit within 24 hours, civil damages for property destruction, environmental violations under federal law, and punitive damages for harassment. The paperwork was a beast, but Margaret tore into it like a shark. The HOA board got the notice first, and chaos erupted. People who'd once followed Linda blindly started backtracking, claiming they'd never supported her insanity. Linda, though, still thought she could talk her way out. She showed up at my house the next morning, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. James, she said, I think we've had a little misunderstanding. I stared at her, arms crossed. Oh, the misunderstanding where you bulldozed my property. She laughed, actually laughed, like this was a trivial spat. You know how these things go, bureaucratic mix-ups. You probably filed the wrong forms. I'm willing to let it slide if you are. I let the silence stretch, watching her confidence crack. She shifted, swallowing hard. Linda, I said finally, the lawsuit's already filed. Her face twitched. Now, that's unnecessary. We're neighbors, James. Do we really need lawyers? You mean like when you tried to lien my house over fake HOA fees? She waved it off. A clerical error. Or when you claimed my greenhouse spread mold? Her lips pursed. It did look suspicious. Or when you bulldozed a legally protected structure? Her jaw tightened. I didn't know it was protected. I smiled. Not my problem. Her fake politeness shattered. You're blowing this out of proportion, she snapped. I leaned in. No, Linda. You bulldozed my greenhouse. She inhaled sharply, realizing I wasn't budging. Her eyes flicked to the door, but she plastered on another smile. How about this? I'll talk to the HOA, drop all the complaints, and personally approve your new greenhouse. No fines, no issues. Not interested, I said without missing a beat. Her face fell. What? You're paying for the damages, Linda. Every cent. And if the state and federal charges stick, good luck with the government lawyers. Her composure broke completely. You're ridiculous. This is my neighborhood. I make the rules. We'll let the courts decide, I said. She stormed off, trembling with rage, and something new, fear. Word of the lawsuit spread like wildfire. Neighbors who'd been too scared to cross Linda started sharing their own horror stories. The local news ran a headline. HOA president bulldozes legal greenhouse, faces lawsuit. Linda's reign was unraveling. The HOA called an emergency meeting. usually her stage for issuing edicts. This time, she was the target. People she'd fined for nonsense. Mailboxes too tall, bird feeders attracting wildlife, kids' chalk drawings ruining pavement, demanded answers. The board, once her puppets, scrambled to distance themselves. Linda tried to take charge, standing at the front, arms crossed. "This is a smear campaign," she barked. "I was enforcing the rules." A guy in the back laughed. "Rules? You fined me for a blue car because it wasn't HOA approved." The room exploded. "You banned inflatable holiday decorations," one woman shouted. "You fined me for trash cans out 20 minutes early," another added. "You told my kids no sidewalk chalk because it hurt the aesthetic." Linda's face reddened with each accusation. She was losing control. The final blow came when Margaret's associate stood up. "Given the lawsuit and potential criminal charges, I advise the HOA to remove Mrs. Carter as president to avoid liability." Linda gaped, waiting for a defender. No one spoke. The board voted her out in under 5 minutes. She stood there, silent, the weight of her collapse sinking in. She'd spent years tormenting people. Now they'd turned on her. She left the meeting in a daze. No outburst, no last stand. Just silence. The lawsuit pressed on. Linda tried stalling, pleading, even offering a shady settlement. Too late. The legal machine was rolling, and she was a powerless, soon-to-be broke ex-HOA president. That night, passing my greenhouse's ruins, I felt a pang of loss, but also satisfaction. Justice was coming, and this was just the start. The courtroom was quiet except for Linda's nervous tapping. She wasn't issuing threats or fines now, just another defendant before a judge who didn't care about her HOA crown. Margaret sat beside me, cool and composed, flipping through notes with a smirk. Across the room, Linda fidgeted, glancing at her lawyer, a guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He'd tried arguing she was just enforcing HOA rules, but that fell apart fast. The judge didn't care about HOA drama. He cared about property destruction, legal violations, and a bulldozed federally protected greenhouse. The prosecution laid it out. Linda personally ordered the demolition, ignored warnings and permits, and destroyed endangered plant species without checking environmental laws. The evidence was ironclad. Security footage of her smirking as my greenhouse fell sealed it. Her lawyer pivoted to ignorance. She didn't know it was protected, thought she was doing her job. But ignorance isn't a defense. The law didn't care, and neither did the judge. When I spoke, I kept it simple. Months of harassment, fake fines, a lien attempt, and spiteful destruction of my legal greenhouse. The facts didn't need embellishment. Linda couldn't meet my eyes. Her arrogance was gone, replaced by dread. The verdict hit hard. Guilty of property destruction, environmental violations, and trespassing. Massive fines, personal payment for damages, and a hint of jail time if she didn't comply. She tried to protest, but it was over. The law had spoken, and Linda had no power left. After the trial, the neighborhood shifted. Linda was still there, technically, but she was a ghost. The HOA ousted her, reversing her petty rules, mailbox colors, holiday decorations, all free again. The air felt lighter, like we'd been holding our breath for years. Linda's humiliation stung worse than the fines. She'd ruled like a dictator. Now she was a pariah. She had to sell her house. Legal fees and damages bankrupted her. A for sale sign sprouted on her pristine lawn, and she was gone in weeks. The neighborhood threw a barbecue after she left. People who'd barely spoken swapped Linda's stories over beers, laughing. Someone made Linda-free zone shirts. I rebuilt my greenhouse. Bigger, better, funded by her damages. A plaque at the entrance read, "Dedicated to Linda. May she learn to mind her own business." I didn't know where she went, didn't care. Rumors said she tried joining another HOA but got rejected when they Googled her. Others said she's in an apartment now, HOA-free, the ultimate irony for a control freak. Life moved on. The neighborhood thrived. I enjoyed my home without her shadow. Linda thought she was above consequences, spent years bulldozing others. In the end, the only thing she flattened was her own life.